Welcome to this explainer. Today we're looking at this really fascinating tension that basically defines our modern world. On one hand, we live in this culture that absolutely demands constant visibility, right? We're pushed to always be out there, to be seen, to have this intensely packed social calendar, and to document every single thrilling moment for the world to see. But on the other hand, for a huge chunk of the population, there is this quiet, profound joy found in just staying indoors. If you're someone who genuinely gets way more excited about a Friday night in your pajamas than a Friday night out at some crowded club, well, you're about to feel very seen. Today, we're completely breaking down the psychology of the homebody.
But hey, before we get into the heavy science, let's address the elephant in the room. Why on earth do we feel so guilty for just staying in? Society has this really funny way of making introverts, or honestly anyone who just prefers a little solitude, feel lazy or boring or antisocial just for wanting to hang out at home. Have you ever felt that weird little pang of guilt when you cancel plans? That nagging voice saying you should be out doing something productive? You might think you're avoiding life, but the science actually tells a completely different story. You're not avoiding your friends, and you certainly aren't broken. You're simply protecting something incredibly vital.
Okay, let's dive into this. We are literally bombarded every single day with the message that living your quote-unquote best life means party pics, VIP events, and just being relentlessly busy. But for a lot of us, the absolute best life is way simpler than that. It's a really good documentary, a warm bowl of soup, and absolutely zero obligations to anyone else. It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? The exhausting, kind of performative expectations the world puts on us versus the simple, incredibly self-aware reality of what our minds and bodies actually crave. Preferring that simple night in isn't sad at all. Honestly, it's profound self-awareness.
Think about it for a second. Think about the sheer volume of mental energy that the outside world just devours. The noise, the traffic, the absolute dread of forced small talk, the uncertainty, the social expectations, all those tiny micro-decisions. And here's the thing, even when these things aren't necessarily bad or toxic, they require bandwidth. For someone who is inwardly wired or highly sensitive, every single one of those interactions acts like a tiny, tiny drain on their emotional battery. Your brain is constantly having to adapt, read the room, and perform. The outside world is literally demanding a whole lot from you.
And then you turn the key in your front door. Finally, silence, relief. It honestly feels like a physical exhale, doesn't it? For so many people, staying home isn't about hiding from the world at all. It's about the deep physical relief of finally stepping out of a state of high alertness. You don't have to monitor your facial expressions anymore. You don't have to force a conversation to keep going. You can literally just stop performing and simply exist.
So, here's where it gets super interesting. This isn't just some quirky personality trait. It's grounded in literal neurology. It's called optimal arousal theory. This is a psychological concept explaining that different nervous systems are biologically wired to require completely different levels of stimulation just to feel good. Some people actually need high stimulation, loud music, new faces, chaotic environments to feel energized. But others? They require very low stimulation to hit that exact same baseline of comfort. So choosing to stay home has absolutely nothing to do with fear or being lazy. It is pure neurology. You're just giving your nervous system exactly what it needs to function correctly.
Think of your social energy exactly like your smartphone battery. There's this great saying, home is the only charger that actually works. Think about extroverts. They basically plug their phone into the crowd, right? Their energy actually comes from the noise, the movement, the chaos of it all. But introverts and people who prefer solitude, every social interaction, even a genuinely fun one with people they absolutely adore, slowly drains that battery. To get back to 100%, they literally have to plug into the quiet. And for them, home is the only outlet that provides the right voltage.
Building on that battery metaphor, let's clear something up real quick about how the extrovert and introvert minds differ. Notice how we are absolutely not saying the introvert mind hates people. That is a massive myth. People who love staying home often really enjoy socializing, just in smaller doses or through much deeper one-on-one conversations. The distinction here is purely about how the mind recharges. The introvert mind recharges in stillness, in quiet, and in solitude. They might leave a party early not because they had a terrible time, but simply because their mind feels totally full. They just have a fundamentally different method for resetting.
So what actually happens when they get back to that sanctuary? Well, we can break down that nervous system reset into 3 literal physiological steps. Step 1, you physically step out of alertness. That sensory overload just stops. Step 2, you stop performing and monitoring social cues. Your brain finally stops working overtime to process everyone else's reactions. And step 3, you sink into predictable familiarity. In psychology, predictability is incredibly powerful. The familiar smell of your living room, the exact rhythm of your evening routine, the specific softness of your own couch, these predictable sensory inputs signal to an overstimulated brain that it is finally actually safe to power down.
And this brilliantly illustrates another massive factor: control. The outside world is completely defined by unpredictability. Loud strangers, last-minute plan changes, terrible weather, shifting social dynamics. But at home, you have total, absolute autonomy. You choose the lighting, you control the volume, you set the exact vibe. For people who feel chronically pressured or who get easily overwhelmed, reclaiming this kind of autonomy isn't just about getting comfortable, it's an absolute survival mechanism. It's the one place where life stops demanding a specific version of them and just allows them to be.
Over time, this fascinating psychological association happens in your brain. Outside equals pressure. Home equals relief. If someone grew up feeling a little out of place, or if they're just highly observant, the outside world suddenly teaches them that being visible means being evaluated. You are constantly being perceived. But home becomes the ultimate safe harbor. It completely eliminates the risk of evaluation, of embarrassment, of judgment. Once the brain learns that a specific space reliably drops your stress levels, it naturally, and quite logically, begins to prefer that space more and more.
Now, we really need to completely debunk this myth that homebodies are just sitting around doing nothing. Imagining, reading, journaling, daydreaming, even those intense 2 a.m. thought spirals. People who love staying home are very often rich in inner life. Their energy doesn't always project outward into the room. It moves inward, where thought transforms into meaning. A quiet little corner is often the exact place where the most brilliant, creative problem-solving happens. The best ideas aren't usually born yelling over the music in a crowded bar. They're born right here, in the solitude of a deeply engaged and active inner world.
All right, as much as we've celebrated the sheer beauty of staying in, we do need to make a crucial pivot here. We have to address the deeper and, frankly, sometimes darker psychology behind why some people stay inside. Because, let's be real, loving to stay at home isn't automatically healthy 100% of the time. Just like any comfort, it can definitely be misused. So we really need to distinguish between healthy restoration and avoidant social withdrawal.
Let's carefully break this down because the distinction is absolutely vital. Healthy restoration is pure neurological nourishment. The brain is successfully recharging the battery, bringing this profound feeling of peace. You're staying home because it fills you up. Avoidant social withdrawal, on the flip side, is a fear response. Home isn't a charger in this scenario. It's a protective shell used to hide from severe anxiety, unresolved trauma, or an intense fear of rejection. From the outside, both people look exactly the same, just chilling on the couch watching Netflix. But psychologically, one is experiencing peace and the other is hiding. Home can be an amazing refuge, but if we aren't careful, it can also become a cage.
But assuming you're in the healthy camp, you probably just have what psychologists call a low stimulation preference. This is the psychological trait where your inner world is just so rich and engaging that you simply do not need the outside world to constantly entertain you. If you have this preference, you don't need external fireworks to feel totally content. So if you're someone who can happily turn down an invitation without an ounce of guilt, who feels genuinely thrilled about a solo Saturday night, you're actually demonstrating a massive amount of self-awareness.
Because ultimately, people who love staying at home are wired for depth over noise. They're actively rejecting a world that often feels pretty shallow, draining, or overly performative, and choosing a life that is deeply intentional instead. They'd much rather have one deeply honest conversation than 10 superficial ones. One incredibly peaceful evening over a packed, chaotic event. They aren't doing less life, they're just relating to life differently. In a world that relentlessly rewards noise and speed, finding a space where your mind can actually breathe is a really beautiful thing. It's an awesome redefinition of what living your best life truly means.
Which brings us to our final thought today. Take a quick moment to really look at your own habits. When you stay home, are you restored or are you hiding? Do you stay in because it legitimately fills your cup or because the thought of leaving just feels a bit too heavy to carry? Understanding your own true motivation is the key to figuring out whether your home is your sanctuary or your shield. So think about that the next time you decide to cancel those plans and just stay in. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.